Morning, little deal. I hope you're doing well too. Dang roosters. They got a lot going already. A whole lot. Turn them out. Hold on. Good morning, Stone. Hold on, baby. Can you hear me? Hey, Sky. Good to see you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Can you hear me okay? Nope, not today. Yes. Yes. Che, good morning. Good morning. Okay, cool, cool, cool. Well, I was I reserved a comment, and not that this issue needs another comment, but I'm gonna go ahead and render one. Uh, go ahead. Nope. Get you a blanket, baby. Get you a blanket. I'm gonna wait for a few people. I'm gonna say this one time only. I'm not gonna go back and forth with nobody, baby. Say, and I wasn't even gonna do this, but I was like, it's like when you're on a diving board as a little kid, and you're like, I'm gonna jump, I'm gonna jump, I'm gonna jump, and you're like, I don't want to jump, and then you just jump. And one more time for the one time, for real, for real. I was like, let me get the computer out. Nope. we're gonna we're gonna keep it low budget this morning. Manny Cat, hey baby, what's happening with you, baby? Sharbar, Share Bear, what's up, baby? Thank you, all of y'all members. Thank you, thank you, thank you. What do y'all think about the polygraph? Let me start there. Kelly, yo, what's up, baby? Constance Sue, good to see you back, baby. Good to see you back, baby. I'm not sure how to pronounce your name. Janelle. Okay. Girl, my eyes is not what they was, baby. They're not as good as they once were. Angie's life, good morning. Stone is messy. Yeah, I think that that's one of the things that I wanted to touch on. Uh, the ghost of a polygraph seemed just like a content maker. Rocket Queen, what's up, baby? Okie Bree, I think that's probably a good curiosity. Good morning. Clarification. I like that name. uh, well, good morning. Good morning. I think that I first want to start off. I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna go ahead and get started so as we ain't here for longer than we gotta be. So good morning to everyone. Sherry T, okay, yeah. And I jacked it up first thing. I jacked it right up. My apologies. Again, good morning. So I'm gonna go ahead. Good morning to anybody that comes in that is a little bit behind or not. So first of all, I want to start by saying that okay. um Again, good morning everybody. Let's start by saying that my job allows me to put a lot of things into perspective. My job is unconventional to most people. My job deals with dealing with death a lot. And so a lot of times, I'll look into the face of somebody that's passed away. And it's very easy to put things into perspective. What's up, Lady Bear? Thank you for your contribution, Queen. You know it means the world to me, baby. The real world to me. It's easy for me to compartmentalize. I know where my emotional switch is, where I could do things that are very unconventional to the rest of the world and not have a problem with them. But it gives me sort of an oversight in my own life, right? It's every day, looking at a new situation, a new whatever. So I say that to say that I bring that sort of view into this situation. And I think that it's a cautionary tale. Yeah, Kellyo. That's really all I want to say about Sure, Bear. Love you, baby. Love you. Hey, Trish. How you doing, baby? So, again, I'm going to focus here. I love all of y'all individually. You already know. So, I look at a lot of different things. I experience a lot of different things. It's a lot of, I want to say there's a lot of emotion, but there isn't until I get home or I get back to home base and kind of process everything. And I think that it's that thing in my life, that in the work that I've done over the last 18 months. Trish, thank you for becoming a new member, baby. Um, it's that restraint that I've learned and implement every day that first of all has allowed me to wait, swisher, wait until I get to this point where I feel like I've looked at and heard enough to fairly render a useless opinion, safely render a useless opinion. So, the polygraph. I think the first thing that I want to say is um, that these situations, they're very touchy, right? This has been an ongoing thing. I understand that the public by and large, they want anything at this point for summer. I get it. I truly do. At the same time, I feel like who are we to try and change the trajectory of the curve? I think that there isn't any one person that there's not any one person that's to blame or everyone wants to run around pointing a finger. I've watched all parties involved point fingers. I think that accountability is probably the main key in all of it, and not the accountability in the end result or the end product. It's the accountability for having got involved, right? And I think before I go too deep into it, I would also extend the same the same cautionary tale to Killer Looks, as I understand he has offered to pay for a subsequent attempt at a polygraph. And I think that his intentions are golden. I think that he, like so many others, wants a finality of some sort, and we think that there could be a finality, uh, not a real finality. It'll be just a momentary sense of finality. However, these polygraphs at this point, they mean nothing. First of all, let me explain why. All the true crime aficionados, they understand that a polygraph is not a prosecutorial tool. It is an investigative tool. It's used in a couple of different ways. It's used to direct the investigation, right? It's used to say, okay, well, within reason of the technology, right? We need to focus on this person or not focus on this person, as well as what you see. Sorry, I'm dealing with a little bit of allergy stuff, so uh, forgive me for sounding like Jabba the Hutt. um, I think that also, and I don't think we know, like in the Chris Watts situation, that's not a phenomenon, right? A lot of times the pressure from the machine and the whole levity of the situation um, can force certain people to go ahead and confess right on the spot. So it is an investigative tool. And I think that that's where it stops, right? Now, I think that also a polygraph examiner that is not tied to is not the arm of law enforcement, probably, in my opinion, isn't the one, right? If that makes sense. Um, because I think when you look at the whole ball of yarn, you understand that any John Q polygrapher that is not tied to being an extension of law enforcement, um, it's all just an opinion, right? It's the opinion of the author. The author is the polygrapher. So when you are trying to accept or not accept the the rendering or the opinion of the polygrapher slash author, it becomes a more convoluted situation, right? Not as if any of these renderings will end up in a court or even talked about in a court. So what is the polygraph really worth, right? The polygraph isn't really worth a whole lot in and of itself. But when it's for public consumption, um, let me back up. I first want to say that I don't know Cher's true intentions. I don't know Ziggy's true intentions. I don't know Mr. Hill's true intentions. What I know is that the whole thing started off. I'm not here to say Cher did this and her plan was this and Ziggy's plan was. That's not what I'm here to say. I'm here to say that taking it for face value, it appears that everyone had a true intention at some point, right? However, it ended up at, is not relevant to me. So you have all of these issues that compound the end result, which is the test didn't happen. Um, I've listened to other channels, say things like, well, they know he has an ID, and for whatever reason, he's balking on the pitch at this point. Whether that's the truth or not, we can't know Fred's true intention at the end. All we can do is listen to all of the opinions, because you can't even state within reason what the facts even are. You're just accepting what you want to accept. Whatever is, your threshold of acceptance, then that's what you're going to accept, right? I think that, in my opinion, the way that this should have been handled was probably dealt with in your fleshy existence, right? Maybe it could have been a situation between Cher and Ziggy that they handled privately, in it that if it worked out, great. I guess one side of me says great. The other side says, should we delve into the scenario? Even if law enforcement says, yeah, go ahead, do it. Should we do it? Right? That's not for me to place weight on for Ziggy or Cher, right? It's not for me to say. That's it. Clarification. It's just a guide, and it is an opinionated guide. So I also think that you almost have to question the ethics. This is what I will say, and render a heavier opinion. I think that you have to question the ethics of the polygrapher for even wanting to get involved. I feel like the polygrapher, if he's not financially driven, he should probably say, hey, that's not a situation, like, I want to deal with cheating wives and husbands, or I want to deal with polygraphing sex offenders who are mandated by the state. And even that is a dedicated, appointed polygrapher that is certified by the state for the state, and that he is going to render these opinions in whether or not a sex offender is accountable, has not further offended, so on and so forth. Um, to me, that standard is the same as it is, for instance, we've got dogs on the Wells property and they're searching for summer wells. Well, then the question is raised, is this a state certified dog that comes from a state kennel that is uh, um, trained by the arm of the state? And I don't mean the dog trainer from Hawkins County that got caught with all the meth, not that one. But a legitimate trainer, right? So the ethics of the polygrapher is, I think, at question here. I think that the fact that the polygrapher would even consider being involved was a catalyst to the situation. If polygraphers, or more um more importantly, this polygrapher, had his ethics been on point, then he would have said, you know what, this is an ongoing investigation, right? I am on safari. Whether this polygrapher is watching any of the coverage, which I'm sure he's not. He's not watching Sheridan and watching Ziggy and then watching Sheridan and watching Ziggy. He's not doing that. I think we can safely say that, right? So I think that that's one of the ultimate blunders in all of this, is that this polygrapher was willing to jump into a situation that is ongoing, unresolved, and that he was going to render an opinion. I don't know what his motive was. Was it in his mind? I mean, he administers the test, so he believes in the science. I call it science loosely, but it's based on a number of things, right? It's based on the baseline of the subject you're questioning or testing. It's based on the sound ideal of the questions, right? If you So I got involved in looking at a forum years back that was a polygrapher forum, like a meeting place for polygraphers to talk. And in their opinion, and in most of their opinion, an inconclusive result on a polygraph was basically it was a industry wide opinion that an inconclusive test, because it's technology, it doesn't have an opinion, it doesn't have feelings, it's not swayed by body language or breathing or any of that, right? Well, I guess it is breathing, but all of the things that could create a bias by looking at with human eyes, that the test should either be should prove deceit or not. So the inconclusive test essentially is a failure of the examiner, right? It is a failure to create a baseline through questions you know to be the truth and then interpreting the results. It has a breakdown of the actual line of questioning. It is an issue with the setup with the tech. It could be any number of things. The human error, right? The human affect or the human effect. So the ethics, I think, is a huge part of it, right? And with the ethics of the polygrapher, you have a trickle down in whatever the true ethics or intentions were of Cher and Ziggy, right? I've heard both sides. I've heard people say, well, Cher knew from the beginning that she wasn't going to do this, this, and this. And then I've heard people say, Ziggy, this is a formal deal. Fred didn't have an ID. You knew from the beginning. Da, 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 da. It's, I mean, you're a some year old man and you don't have an ID. Like, that's kind of not acceptable as people our age, right? We should all have IDs. That being said, so I've heard all the things, and it's thankfully the YouTube gods, if that's not a blasphemous comment all in and of itself, the YouTube gods. I've always been kind of blessed where I can kind of maneuver through videos, and I just kind of seem to always land. And I know you guys have all felt the phenomenon too. It's that feeling you get when you jump into listening to a video or a live stream and you're like, that's what I needed to hear to sum up all of this, right? I don't need to hear all of the sum of parts. I just needed to hear that. So in this situation, each time I would click something on, it was like, well, that's what maybe I needed to hear. So I come to this place where I just believe that I think we lose sight of the bigger picture. I think that the bigger picture is one of two things. Either Detective Pruitt has no idea, or they know within reason who the offender is, and that they just can't prove it, right? There's not enough to bring her home in whatever facet she may be. Whether it's one, I don't even want to say it, whether it's one way or the other, there just isn't enough evidence to bring her home. And then that fact compounds the ability to get the warrant, right? So, not losing sight of the polygraph situation, I think that you have a professional. Anytime you hear the word polygraph, it automatically injects this inference or this assumption that it's law enforcement based. Let me tell you what, that particular polygrapher, that polygraph examiner, very rarely is going to do anything that has to do with law enforcement. All of that stuff is going to be civil court based. It's going to be, and I say it probably stops there, right? He deals with a lot of cheating wives and husbands, business partners. Like, he is very rarely going to be pulled into law enforcement situations. That's just the meat and the potatoes of the situation, right? Right. Clarification. Whether that's the truth or not, that's their business. That's my opinion. And I don't say that with any shade. So I think ultimately, and this has really taken a turn from where I wanted it to go, but I think that the ultimate issue here is the polygrapher's ethics. I don't know what their code of ethics is, but every single industry that you're going to work in, no matter who you are, there's an etiquette. There's the easier, softer way to do things, and then there's the hard line. And I believe that this examiner, he strayed away from whatever the ethics are. And to even venture to think that the polygraph industry, or the art, if you will, of the polygraph has no ethics. This is a clear cut situation where the examiner should have the utmost form of ethics. He should have not have got involved. I believe if he was going to get involved, it ought not be for a financial motive, right? He should have just said, hey, what is an hour of my time running the machine? What is a couple hours of my time working with the client to formulate said questions, right? So, and I'm kind of reiterating myself, but that trickle down from his ethics, it bled into what we all have today, the end product. It bled right into it. So now, because, it's like, do we think we can walk into TBI or Hawkins County and just say, hey, Ronnie, hand me that case file like we're detectives? No, we can't. So it should be the same barriers and obstacles for us to be able to reach out to a polygrapher and say, hey, we got this guy that the internet thinks is a suspect, or this person thinks it's a suspect. I think that you've heard Ronnie Lawson make one blanket statement, which is, sort of everyone involved is a suspect, right? You've heard Pruitt say things to Andy that he probably should not have. And I think Andy's taken that to the bank. Now, let me step back. Maybe Pruitt holds no responsibility in making statements like, oh, well, your name hasn't came up in it, and I wouldn't worry about what Fred says, right? Sort of alluding to the fact that, Fred's an idiot. Maybe that is an investigative measure. Maybe Andy is absolutely in the top five of suspects. And now Andy, without having the sort of self-awareness that a lot of people have, he's taken it to the bank and not looked at it as at least a bifold situation. Like, it could fold either way on him, right? He's presenting it to the interwebs like it is 100%. I'm not involved because Pruitt said, yeah, okay, Andy B. Or, okay, Fred, right? And again, I say that with, at least to Andy B, the bare minimum of shade. But, you know, suspects or people of potential interest, they're going to cherry pick what it is they want to believe. And then in this dynamic situation, what Andy wants to believe is the same thing he wants you to believe. Good morning, Dorian. Right? The thing that Andy wants to believe is the same thing he wants to superimpose and impress upon you to believe. So, all of those things, right, our ability to even, the polygrapher's interest should be in justice. I don't care if it's trying to find out, did a man cheat on a woman, or you the baby daddy, blah, 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 blah. He should have an ethic that is to protect the interest of the victim, hands down. Protect the interest of the victim. Be able to be self aware enough to look inside and outside the situation at the same time and say, is my involvement in this situation, is it helpful and useful, and is it with or on par with the ethics that I am expected to carry out with my job every single day, right? Making that sound decision now comes back to the public consumption, right? What if the test is carried out and Fred fails the test? Does it mean anything? No. What if he passes the test? Does that mean anything? No. What it does is sway John or Sally Q YouTube subscriber their opinion. 100% of us here on the YouTube would never be a juror, and we also would never be a juror that ever heard anything about the results of the polygraph because it doesn't mean crap in the court of law, right? Also, it is Fred's constitutional right to be hooked up to the machine, take his first breath to answer the first question and say, I don't want to do this. That does not impose guilt or innocence. That is the really slippery slope with the polygraph. It means nothing. It is just for Detective Pruitt. And that is if Detective Pruitt even believes that the polygraph is a useful tool. There is nothing written anywhere that says, okay, we have to hook Andy and Fred and Don and Candace up to the machine. That is just Pruitt identifying to him, in his opinion, that the polygraph is a useful tool. Not every detective subscribes to that, right? Not every detective is Chris McDonough, right? It means nothing. And so we've lost sight of the fact as a YouTube community, we've lost sight of the fact that it means nothing. It means nothing. As you have the same constitutional right to walk out of a polygraph test or to not even subscribe to the idea of it and not be that's why it's not admissible, because John Q or Sally Q juror would not be able to dictate the fact that, well, hey, he didn't take the test, that makes him guilty, or he took the test, right? He took the test, he must be innocent, right? Because no guilty person would ever sit down and take the test, right? Chris Watts did. And that was optional for him. It was also optional for him to make a confession at the end, right? So that's the reason why those issues and those pressures of having the information with the room for bias. That's why polygraph is never talked about in the court of law. Ever, 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 ever. Right? So that's the issue, and for me, the solution, right? Not get involved. And Fred and Ziggy and Cher would have never had the availability to think this was an option if polygraphers or polygraphers in this situation had a tighter set of ethics, right? Shame on him. I've heard, I'm going to leave that alone. I just know that his ethics are not on par. He's financially motivated. So for the cost of a polygraph, 250, 350, 10,050, whatever the price was or is, that's not enough to affect the outcome of the community. Now, let's say this, a man in Indiana administering a test to a man many on the internet thinks is a suspect, how that could affect justice in Tennessee if, let's say, hypothetically, Fred is brought to trial. He's charged and brought to trial. Now you run into an issue where the jury pool of Hawkins County or wherever the venue of jurisdiction is for this case, this hypothetical case. Now they've been subjected to seeing potentially media on the internet that is only available because a polygraph examiner with little or no ethics from Indiana got involved in a situation he should have never been involved in. All he has to do is affect one juror. That's it. One. So the ideal that this polygraph, AKSK, that this polygraph situation was going to be helpful in rendering anything is absolutely asinine. It's asinine. We want clean justice, right? The cornerstone of justice is that understanding, and I say it all the time, and I have said it, is that they understand that a slick willy criminal will beat the system. The ideal is that not one innocent man or woman be unjustly incarcerated for a crime they did not commit. Hooah? That's the cornerstone of it. It doesn't have anything to do with lawyer ethics or what judges can and can't do or what public defenders do or what cops do or what detectives do or what canine search dogs do. It's so that one man or woman never be unjustly incarcerated. Right, Queen. That's the bare bones essentials, right? So is it is not even for us to decide if Cher is at fault or if Ziggy is at fault or Fred is at fault. It's the polygrapher that's at fault. He's financially driven by nominal amounts of money, right? To get involved in a scenario that he should not. The parameters should always be very strict. The guidelines be very strict. The boundaries have no blurred or gray edges or gray material. And that this polygraph examiner should stay in his lane. Kicking up dust. And see, that's where we've been jaded. I'm not saying you're jaded, but that's where the public is even given the opportunity or the availability to make an opinion about what the test was or wasn't based upon what you think your opinion of the intention of Cher or Ziggy, whether it was this or that, a scam, a money grab. Those things are secondary or even, hundredth airy. I know that's not a term, but those issues are not as profound as the ethics or lack of ethics by this particular polygrapher. Nothing else, right? All that other stuff is it is opinion based crap that shrouds the fact that he did not have the ethics, right? There should be parameters like you can only as a private polygrapher or public, I guess, in a sense as well. That goes both ways. Like he's private in that he's not associated to law enforcement in that way, but he's also public where if you have 250, 350 bucks, he'll do a disservice for you. Right? He'll do his best to be the most superficial injustice available. Sure, clarification. Yeah, I understand. 100%. But at the same time, when that call was initially made, whatever call it was, doesn't matter about deposits. This is my opinion. Doesn't matter about test dates. He should have said, what is the perceived outcome? What are you trying to obtain from this? And then Cher and Ziggy could have laid it out, and he says, "I'm sorry, that's outside that's outside the scope of my ethics," right? Not like, is it going to be cash or check? It's a little girl that's been missing for 4.5 years. So, yeah, is this going to be an injustice all of its own, or a disservice in some way that I don't want to be responsible for? Point blank. Point blank. Because again, you know how we say, somebody say, well, that's a fruitless plight you're involved in, Benny Keys. Or, who any, Tom, Dick, or Harry. That's a fruitless plight. In my opinion, that's a fruitless plight. But then the true activist or the true advocate in us will retort by saying, if I can only save one, or I can only affect one, right? So it's worth it if my reach is only to one person. Then you have an ethicless polygraph examiner who doesn't even think of the ramifications of all of this, and saying, if I only affect one juror, if I can only affect one juror, then we can completely wipe out the idea of any swift, clean justice, right? Let's say this ball of snow rolls downhill and it gets bigger than any of us can stop at the bottom, and Fred is deceitful. One juror can be affected by a test that doesn't mean anything, performed by an examiner that does not have Summerwell's best interest at heart. Now you have an issue with rendering a judgment. Let's say he positively affects the wrong juror, and the facts are laid out that, for instance, hypothetically, Fred Hill is the guy. But this juror thinks that because John John Q examiner, that has no right to be involved, has negatively but positively affected a juror, so they render her not guilty, and that Fred's actually the guy. All it has to do is affect one of the right or wrong people, and you have a mess. You have a hung jury, and you're doing it all over again. Now, when you do it, you're doing it with fresh eyes, which could be a good thing or a bad thing. This is a razor, justice is a razor's edge that that your sense of civic duty rides on. It is a razor's edge. Each side, each side of it is an alcohol lake. It's a lake of alcohol. You ride the edge. The ideal is to ride the edge from onset to conclusion, and to not fall off on either side, because either side is going to burn. It is going to burn. There you go, Kellyo. I don't know. That's a very good question. Dorian, just muddies the water. Now, I'm not saying we understand as activists. Do I think Cher? This is the question. Do I think, or a important and important question? Do I think Cher wants the best for Summer Wells? I do. Do I think Ziggy? And this is outside of anyone. This is my opinion. Do I think Ziggy wants the best for Summer Wells? I do. I'm not here to render an opinion about what I think Fred wants, because that's not important. Fred is Fred is a outside component. What we're focusing on in this in this line of questioning is Cher or Ziggy's true intention. That is to bring what they feel like is moving closer towards a conclusion for Summer Wells. Unfortunately, this situation does not offer that. And I think that everyone's judgment is clouded, again, going back to a scrupulous and unethical polygraph examiner. What case, Casey? Exactly, Casey. Yeah, like this is an ongoing investigation. Let's go ahead and jump in both feet first or head first and dirty it up as best as we can. The only reason this moved forward, no matter Cher's motivation or Ziggy's motivation, the only reason this thing moved forward was because the polygrapher said, "Yeah, make me make let's make a deal." Shame on him. Kicking up dust. Uh, um, Not playing referee, but I would agree. There isn't either side that has been innocent of this thing trickling down to talking about kids. I've seen people on Ziggy's side talk about kids. I've seen people on Cher's side talk about her children. What do either side's children have to do with this? That is the fruit of the poisonous tree. The fruit of the poisonous tree is that now people are saying, oh, well, this, and this should happen to Cher's kids, or this, and this should happen to Ziggy's kid. How do their children, respectively, have anything to do with any of this? They don't. Good morning, Turn. They do not, and they should not. So I would encourage both sides to not talk about the kids because once you bring up the kids now become the focal point of it, right? They become the very thing that is most important but is last remembered, right? Alan East, good morning. Jinx, I agree. And that's really the only firm line I would walk is that either side needs to stop talking about kids. Either side needs to just move forward. And I don't know who's going to do it first. I would implore or employ both of you to try to be the first to move forward, right? Move on forward. I want to thank Brandy B for the lovely Rooster Whisperer shirt from years afar. So let's try to objectively and then at other times be able to employ a subjective view to it all. Can we do that? Let's not get caught up in the drama of what we think it is, what we think it should have been, and what it is now, or what it could be, right? All those angles, right? It means nothing. It means nothing. I mean, if it's going to rain today or tomorrow is more important than what this test was going to bring. This test meant nothing. And we put so much weight on it. And now we've got toxic people with little tiny circles, right? With turtles on them, right? Like the fast turtle or, wild horse rider or girl cowboy boots. These people, they are hiding behind a little tiny circle emoji the size of a chicken pox. And they're making very powerful statements and comments. Powerful in toxicity. That's it. Toxicity, right? So there's little tiny circles called KCK and Stone and Alan East and Kelly O. Our opinion means nothing. We are here to be entertained, informed, sometimes led astray, sometimes put back on the right path. We're here to cry. We're here to laugh. All of those things. When ultimately, when you sign this thing with your finger to make an account or become a content creator, It's for entertainment purposes only. Hua is for entertainment purposes, nothing else. There should be nothing else. We should all be um, we should all be introspective enough to say that this is or isn't helpful. Blue Eyes Lee, good morning. And that's just where it starts and stops. So I'm coming up on an hour, and that's really all. That's all I have. Good morning, Benny, and all. I think you just explained why no suspects or witnesses should ever speak publicly during an alleged investigation. All of this could affect justice. It only has to affect one juror, and one juror only, and then you have an issue, right? Because let's not be so naive to think that when there is a hung jury or there is an issue with rendering justice, that that everyone by and large doesn't hear about it. Small town Hawkins County is going to hear, oh well, we had a hung jury. So then when we come back to court again to retry it, people are now influenced with the idea that justice wasn't found the first time. So now the burden for the next run of jurors, their burden is heavier or lighter, either way. And then if you look back through cases in history, you will have that one juror that, there's misconduct or they've rendered an opinion based upon a feeling, not the facts. And so they've affected the whole course of this thing, right? So be mindful, be respectful, and have patience. That's the only thing. Anything that is done in the dark will come to the light. It's not going to happen on our time. But understand when the justice comes, it's the perfect timing from God, right? If it's 10 years from now, we're like, oh man, we're gonna piss and moan on how long it took, and lose sight of the fact that it came exactly when it was supposed to come. It doesn't have to make sense to us. It just has to fit into the grander plan, the more grand plan, right? So that's it. Clarification. Bring it back to summer. Um, Stay the course. Hold the pattern. Whatever terminology you want to use. Be patient, right? I've heard so many people say, um, Detective Pruitt doesn't care about finding Summer Wells. You think so? Ronnie Lawson doesn't care about finding Summer Wells. You think so? Do you understand the things that would have to actually be in play for Ronnie Lawson to not want to find the girl? Or for Detective Pruitt? Like all of these wild things would all have to be happening at one time for that to even be partially true. It's sort of like the whole Tupac's alive. Well, do you understand the people that would have to be involved to make that possible? Police, detectives, chiefs, helicopter pilots, medical examiners, all the things. So it's when you look at the wider picture, some of these things that I've heard people comment over the past years, you're just like, you're an idiot, right? You are a complete. Your life is full of buffoonery because you think that this is even possible. Scary to think that you drive a car on the same roads I drive on, right? So, anyways, Scout, good morning. Kicking up dust, good morning. Jackie. But even then, maybe I'm misappropriating your comment. But even then, it's not for anyone to do those things. Oh yeah, kicking up dust. Trust they are, right? We don't know because you don't see them out there. Because we don't see them out there every day kicking up dust and getting grass stains on their jeans does not mean they're not looking. It doesn't. Just because Jody Sue tells you they're not searching anymore, or you know, XYZ, there it's still happening. Hey Shay, it's still happening every day to some degree, to some facet. It's still happening. Sarah Davies, Summer Wells will actually get justice, but it's going to be on God's time. God will reach down and say, Detective Pruitt, now's the day. Or new police chief, hey, Mr. Tony, today's the day, right? And you just have to be willing to accept that when God does that and brings the little girl home, that it was perfect timing and it was exactly the way it was supposed to be. Nothing more, nothing less. Sure, vampire, our fleshy, earthly bodies want it to be right now. But again, we have to understand that it's on his time. Well, I just watched. Did you see that? Uh-uh. The squirrel was running across, and he took a leak that just looked like a shower. Oh, really? Yeah, just. All the things. Every knee will bend, Amy. That's it. In Terrell, Texas. Thank you, Kicking Up Dust. I feel like a lot of times, what do they say? Common sense sometimes isn't so common, right? Exactly, Shay. I'm not willing to just. I'm not willing to watch the world lock up Fred Hill because they want him to be the guy that's good for it. I want the actual person, right? Not saying Fred isn't the actual person or is the actual person, but I'm not going to be called to a jury. So my opinion doesn't mean anything. What I'm here to do is accept justice when it's rendered, right? The history of crime will be all the answer you need. That's it. If they say it's this person, it's for you to accept it's that person and move forward with your life. They said good morning, Mama Keys. Good morning. That's it. So, Mr. Persevere, what's up, baby? You just have to accept it's one of those things that's outside of your grasp, right? Even if you are called as a potential juror, it is not on you to take up your opinion in the court of law. It is on the facts to prevail. That's it. The facts must prevail. Anyways, that's all I have to say about the issue. I will not touch on the polygraphs again. I would, uh, I would tell Killer Looks, I love him like a brother. Uh, uh, this is cautionary tale. I hope that something I've said here can affect even just one person's ideal of how this is happening or how it should conclude. Right? We don't want to put the wrong person in prison and then 20 years from now, when we're all old and decrepit, we find out they got the wrong guy and that the real offender is out there potentially offending against other children. We don't want that.
Look at the John Bonet thing.
There you go. Yeah. You yeah.
20, more than 25 years.
And it's still cooking, right? It's cooking. Let it cook. Let it simmer. You don't rush a pork chop. Right? So, thank you everyone for joining me this morning. It's just my opinion. It's just my opinion. It doesn't mean anything. But I think this one is a little more leaning towards it meaning something, right? So the breakdown of the whole thing is shame on you, John Q. Polygrapher. You had no right to get involved in something that is outside of what should be the scope of your duties. I hope all of you have a great day. And remember, the absence of evidence is not the evidence it's not the evidence of absence at all. Have a great day.
I thought of a